Okay, this is an explanation for Unit 3 Test Version A, FRQ. So scenario 1, Harley-Davidson is a manufacturer of Great American motorcycles. Harley-Davidson's research and development division are investigating tread life for motorcycle tires. The Harley-Davidson researchers have suggested that a study be conducted to determine whether motorcycle tires produced using a new synthetic rubber compound have a longer tread life than the tread life of motorcycle tires produced using the standard compound. A researcher in the division suggested the study be designed in the following way. Select 100 identical Harley-Davidson motorcycles. It's interesting that they selected 100 identical motorcycles. And the reason they did this was to control for variations between each motorcycle. In other words, some may wear the tires differently than others. So they, by selecting 100 of the same type, they eliminate some outside variables. And randomly assign 50 of these motorcycles to one group and the rest to a second group. So basically we have 100 motorcycles and we're going to randomly assign to 50, to one group of 50 and to another group of 50. All 100 motorcycles will be equipped with front tires produced using the standard rubber compound. So all the motorcycles on the front tire will have the same compound, while the motorcycles in group A will be equipped with rear tires using the synthetic compound, and those in group B will be equipped with rear tires using the standard compound. So basically, the front tires for all the motorcycles are the same, but the back tires in group A will have the new synthetic, and the back tires in group B will have the rubber compound. A total of 100 riders will be randomly selected from the population of Harley-Davidson riders gathered in Sturgis, South Dakota, because they are regular riders and represent Harley-Davidson's target market. Basically, they selected 100 riders that are representative of the people they want to sell to. The 100 motorcycles will be randomly assigned to 100 riders, with a different motorcycle assigned to each rider, and the riders will be asked to ride the motorcycle for a 6-month period. At the end of the 6-month period, the researchers will compare the mean amount of rear tire wear for the motorcycles in the two groups. What type of design has been proposed for this study? Well, basically, you have two different treatment groups. You have a treatment group with a synthetic tire in the rear and one with a standard tire in the rear. And we have 100 different subjects, and these are the riders. And basically, they're going to randomly assign them. Well, in this case, they're randomly assigning 100 riders, and the way they're doing that is they're putting all the names in a hat. Even though they didn't tell that, you can surmise, because that's what they're doing, is they're putting all the names in a single hat. When you put all the names in a single hat, or you number all the riders 1 to 100, and you randomly select, because it's a single bin or a single hat, this makes this a completely randomized design. So a completely randomized design, everyone is going into a single bin or single hat. That is different than a block design, where in a block design you're going to have you'll have a hat or bin for every single block. Okay, next thing it asks for the rear tire, it asks for the response variable, and the response variable in this case was rear tire wear. The other thing I want to mention while I'm here is they have 100 riders, and 50 will be assigned to synthetic A, and 50 will be randomly assigned to synthetic B. Those 50 represent replication. And the reason we use replication is so that we can make sure that we can generalize. If we only choose one person, that one person might have special traits. So by including multiple, we're able to generalize over the variation of several different different people types. Another researcher recommends using a blocking design of 100 riders, 50 of whom are men and 50 of whom are women. So we have a block, 100 riders, and we're going to have 50 men and 50 women. All of the participants have similar riding habits. That's a very important statement. By telling us to have similar riding habits, we can generally surmise that there's not a difference between the men and the women because they're all similar. For the purpose of the study, for their riding habits are, for the purpose of the study, should the researchers block by gender or weight? Once again, they told us that the riding habits are similar, so we're going to assume that there's not a substantial difference in the way the genders ride the motorcycle. However, there could be differences in weight, and weight may impact the study. You always block on the variable that you believe will have the greatest impact on the study. And then the way this is set up, it sounds like weight will have a greater impact than gender on tread wear. So what you should be saying is block on the variable that has the greatest impact. I believe weight will have the greatest impact. I believe that because weight will impact how the tires wear. And they say that the cyclists have the same riding habits, so there's probably not much difference or any difference between genders. Technically, you could make an argument for gender, but you'd have to be careful on how you did so. Then this next one says design and carry out a match pair design. When they're telling you to do this, they want when they design and carry it out, they want a complete walkthrough of how you assign treatments, what the treatments are, and what you're comparing at the end. Well, in this particular case, we want a match pair design. In a match pair design, you're going to make sure that each subject receives both types of treatments. And there's a couple different ways to have achieved this in this scenario. First thing we need to do is assign to treatment groups. Well, that means I need to know what my treatment groups are. So I'm going to say that treatment group A is a treatment group that has the synthetic tire on the front and the standard compound in the back. Treatment group B has the standard compound in the front and the synthetic in the back. Now I need to assign my 100 riders. Just like in a completely randomized design with a match pair, I'm going to have a single hat and I'm going to put everyone in it. So I put everyone into a hat and mix the first 50, and then I put the names in the hat and mix. The first 50 names drawn will be assigned to treatment group A, and they will receive the rubber in the back first with the synthetic in the front. The other 50 will receive it the opposite way. At the end of time, we will measure the tread wear to see which tire maintains the tread wear the longest. Alternatively, you could have said that, hey, I'm going to put, I could have gone with the original 100 motorcycles that they had, 50 of which had the synthetic in the rear and 50 of which had the rubber, the standard rubber in the rear. At which point, you put 100 names in a hat and mix, 50 are assigned to synthetic in the rear, the remaining 50, the 50 drawn or go to the synthetic in the rear, the other 50 get the rubber in the rear. After 3 months, we swap, and then they swap motorcycles, and then we do the same thing again. And so the first 50 that had the rubber in the rear, the rubber on the rear tire will switch to the synthetic on the rear tire, and the others that had the synthetic in the rear tire will switch to the rubber on the rear tire. And they'll have that for 3 months. And at the end of 6 months, we will measure the tread wear to see what differences there were, so we know which one has a greater life. Which of the 3 designs is better? So we basically had, in this case, we had a completely randomized design, a block design, and a match pair design. Typically speaking, a block design is going to be better than a block design is going to be better than a completely randomized design because you're accounting for a variable. In this case, you're accounting for weight. However, the best design is the match pair design. And in general, the match pair design is always the best design. And the reason it is because someone was tested twice, and because they're tested twice, we actually control for the differences between each individual. So if you ride in different places, you ride at different times of the day, you are heavier, you ride faster. All those things are accounted for because I got tested twice, so I can go, you know what, this rider wears this tread this much, and wears this tread this much. So the best one is to always use a matched pair. It's not always possible, but when possible, use a matched pair because it controls for differences among the individual subjects, and the others do not. And a matched pair actually is a special type of blocking. It's just been blocked all the way down to the individual. Okay, so this is scenario 2 for version A. There are more than 100 species of poison dart frogs. A mad scientist is interested in studying whether different insects eaten by frogs and different humidity levels in water impact the toxicity of the poison of the frog. The mad scientist has ordered a shipment of young golden poison dart frogs from a supply house for use in the study. The experiment is to be conducted in a laboratory with 25 golden poison dart frogs are placed randomly into each of 24 tanks. So real quickly, if I have 25 frogs per tank, 25 times 24 means I have a total of 600 frogs that I'm going to distribute among the tanks. And yes, I actually changed the number just to make this explanation easier, but we adjusted for that when we were doing the grading. The mad scientist is planning to use 3 different types of insects: crickets, flies, and grasshoppers, and 2 humidity levels, low and high. List of treatments the mad scientist plans to use in this experiment. Well, in this case, we have crickets, 3 types of insects, and 2 types of humidity levels. So 3 times 2 is 6. So I have 6 different treatment groups. So my treatment groups in this case are crickets with crickets with a low humidity, crickets with a high humidity. I have flies with a low humidity, and I have flies with a high humidity. Then I have grasshoppers with a low humidity and grasshoppers with a high humidity. So I have 6 different treatment groups, and I have 24 tanks. So 24 divided by 6 means I'm going to have the same treatment group occur 4 different times. So 4 of the tanks will have the crickets with the low humidity, 4 will have the crickets with the high humidity, etc., until we have 4 grasshoppers with the low humidity and 4 grasshoppers with the high humidity. Anyway, I needed to list all the treatments, and I just mentioned them all. The next one says, using the treatments listed in Part A, describe a completely randomized design that will allow the mad scientist to compare the frog's toxicity after 3 weeks. So basically, I need to randomly assign all the frogs that I got. Well, we know we have 600 frogs. We also know, and so you need to sit there and go, okay, we have 25 times 24, so we have 600 frogs, and we have 6 treatment groups. So basically, there'll be 4 tanks of each type of treatment. So here's what I would do. I would go to tank A, and tank A would be maybe the crickets with low humidity. I've made sure I've numbered all of my frogs from 1 to 600. And then I have little slips of paper that I put into a hat numbered 1 to 600. I'd mix those numbers in a hat and draw without replacement. The first 25 numbers drawn, the frogs associated with that would go into the first tank. I would then draw the next 25 numbers. The frogs associated with the next 25 numbers would go into the next tank. And I would do that for all 24 tanks, for all the 24 tanks. At that point, I've talked about the randomization process. I've also named my treatments, and I've also told you how that they were being assigned to the treatments by saying that I had 4 tanks of each type of treatment group. After 3 weeks, I would take the frogs out and I would measure their toxicity to determine which treatment increased it the most. Give a statistical advantage to having only golden poison dart frogs in the experiment. Explain why this is an advantage. The advantage is I've controlled for differences between the frogs, different types of poison dart frogs. One poison dart frog might react differently to a diet or humidity than the other. So here I've actually narrowed it down and controlled for an outside variable by limiting it to the golden poison dart frogs. That's the advantage. The disadvantages of which it mentions in the next part. I can only generalize this to the young golden poison dart frogs. It cannot be generalized to all poison dart frogs, but it can generalize to poison dart frogs. Now, please remember, this is not being generalized to the sample. When we generalize to the population. So by having done this, I can generalize to all, I have to generalize to a similar population. Similar population is young golden poison dart frogs. So my sample is a subset of that. So consequently, that's what I can generalize to. Okay, this is test version A, scenario 3. Students with test anxiety sometimes enroll in yoga classes to help them overcome this fear. Typically, 9 to 10 one-hour yoga classes are needed before improvement is noticed. A study was conducted to determine whether the drug Tylenol, used in combination with fewer yoga classes, would help students overcome their test anxiety. Each of 43 students who participated in the study received a pill before each of 3 one-hour yoga sessions. 26 of the 43 students were randomly assigned to receive a Tylenol pill, and the remaining 17 received a placebo. Here we don't have equal size treatment groups. That's okay. We want to make sure that we have enough to say that that we have enough replication for each one to say that we've accounted for differences in the population. So we have 26 in one, and we have 17 in another, and that may or may not be enough to say that, hey, that accounts for the different students, but that we'll see if they ask us about that. After the completion of the 3 one-hour yoga classes, none of the 43 students received additional Tylenol pills, nor did they attend any more yoga classes. So basically, 3 one-hour yoga classes and a pill, and that's it. 3 months after the administration of the pills and the 3 therapy sessions or the 3 yoga sessions, each of the 43 students were evaluated to see if he or she had improved. Was the study an experiment or an observational study? Provide an explanation to support your answer. All right, so the primary thing that you have to say to be an experiment, as treatments had to be randomly assigned. In this case, treatments were randomly assigned to the 2 groups, one receiving a placebo pill and 3 hours of a yoga class, and the other receiving, the other 26 receiving a Tylenol pill and 3 hours of yoga class. So treatments were randomly assigned, so this is an experiment. When the data was analyzed, the Tylenol group showed statistically significantly more improvement than the placebo group did. Based on this result, would the researchers be justified in concluding that the Tylenol pill and 3 one-hour yoga sessions are as beneficial as 9 to 10 yoga sessions without the pill? Justify your answer. Well, while there was a statistical difference, it was between the comparison of the 3 one-hour yoga classes and a placebo versus the 3 one-hour yoga classes and the Tylenol pill. Nowhere in the study was 9 to 10 yoga classes tested. So we have no idea whether the Tylenol pill and 9 to 10 and with 3-hour classes is better than the 9 to 10 because it was not tested. So we cannot make that conclusion because, once again, we tested the Tylenol pill in 3 one-hour yoga classes. We did not test the 9 to 10, so we cannot make the comparison because it was not part of the test. A newspaper article that summarized the results of the study did not explain how it was determined which students received Tylenol and which received the placebo. Suppose the researchers allowed the therapist to choose which students received Tylenol and which received the placebo, and no randomization was used. Explain why such a method of assignment might lead to an incorrect conclusion. First off, randomization is always necessary, and it's necessary to equal out the effects of uncontrolled for variables that might impact the study. So basically, there are things that could impact the study about the individual students that weren't controlled for, and again, randomization equalizes those things. Further, the researchers either intentionally or subconsciously may place people into groups so that the study ends up with specific results. This would be bias. But the primary purpose is, creating a confounding variable. The primary purpose of, and this is the one that you got credit for, is saying that, hey, it is important to randomize to equalize the effects of variables that are not accounted for, to avoid the effects of confounding. Further, it's important to make sure that we don't assign students to a group that we think these will get better easier with this one, and vice versa. We cannot do that. Okay, that tends to bias the results. Okay, this is test version B test collecting data, scenario 1. Researchers are designing an experiment to compare two different types of swim caps, caps A and B, that are completely different in material and appearance to investigate which type is better for minimizing swim times for swimmers. The experiment will consist of distributing the swim caps to swimmers who are classified as either competitive or recreational. A randomized block design is planned with blocking by classification of swimmer. Random samples of 50 competitive swimmers and 50 recreational swimmers will be selected. Each swimmer within each classification will be randomly assigned to wear either the type A swim cap or the type B swim cap, and their swim times will be recorded for a 1,500-meter swim. What is the statistical advantage of blocking by the classification of swimmer? First off, we'll always block on a variable that we think will impact the study. That is not the general treatment. Well, in this case, we have two different types of swimmer, and we're going to block by swim types, competitive versus recreational, because we believe that they will have a big impact on swim times. And the reason we believe that, and because due to possible technique or whatever, that we believe that there's going to be a difference between the swimmer types and the way that they react to the hat. We want to know if this cap is good for both recreational and for competitive swimmers, so we need to make sure that we have both groups being tested with the cap. So once again, we're blocking and saying that way we make sure that the competitive swimmers get cap A and they get cap B, and the recreational will have those. So this is why we are we're using the blocking by it, because we believe that the swimmers have different characteristics that might impact the way they react to a swim cap. Why is it important to randomize the type of swim cap the swimmer will wear instead of allowing the swimmer to choose the swim cap? First off, very first thing, we always need to randomize, and we randomize to equalize effects that are outside of the control of the study. So basically, we need to do that because we want to make sure that we equalize any variable that's not controlled for in the study. So that's one thing. The other thing is we can bias the study by going, hey, they chose this one because of its color. Well, it turns out that one wasn't as good, or it worked better, or whatever. So we need to make sure that we don't have one group with a swim cap that works better than the other. And so we do that through randomization, because there could be a confounding variable or that biases our results if we allow them to make the choice. How does this experiment address replication? What is the benefit of replication? Well, the way we have replication is we have 50 competitive swimmers and 50 recreational swimmers. So that means we have 50 we have basically 25 competitive swimmers using the swim cap A, and 25 competitive swimmers using swim cap B, and 25 recreational swimmers using A, and 25 using B. So our replication is the 25 swimmers wearing of each group wearing the hat. Okay, the different swim caps. So that's the way we do it. The reason we do it is because replication allows us to generalize to the population. If we only use one person, it could be that one person reacts a specific way. By using multiple subjects, we know that we can generalize to a larger population. Design and carry out a match pair design for the scenario. Okay, so in a match pair design, the person is going to get tested twice. So basically, you're going to need to wear swim cap A and swim cap B. So in this particular instance, we do not need to block, because the match pair design is its own special type of block, where it blocks on you're being blocked on yourself. And the reason we like match pair is because it controls for differences within the individual. So it's a very effective blocking. Because you've blocked all the way down to the individual. So here's what you do. You have a single hat. When you have a match pair design, you have a single hat or a single bin. So I'd put the names of the 100 swimmers into a hat, and I would draw. The first 50 names would get swim cap A first, and then followed by swim cap B. The next 50 names would get swim cap B first, followed by swim cap A. So this is the way it would work. If you were in the first group with swim cap A, those swimmers would swim 1,500 meters and their times recorded. After an appropriate amount of time, they would switch caps, and they've had time to rest. They switch caps and then swim the 1,500 meters again. The second treatment group would start off with swim cap B. They would swim the 1,500 meters after an appropriate amount of time, and they've rested up. They go put on swim cap A and then swim the 1,500 meters. At the end of the time, the differences in time would be noted to determine which swim cap was best. Please make sure that you are specific about your random assignment. You can't just say, I'm going to randomly assign. How are you randomly assigning? In this case, we put their names in a hat and we drew. The first 50 names went to treatment group 1, and the second 50 names went to treatment group 2. A diagram may help you in your explanation, but a diagram is not sufficient by itself. Okay, this is scenario 2 for version B. Cyanide is a naturally occurring poison that can enter and contaminate groundwater through eroding granite rock formations or from burned forests containing peach trees. The United States Centers for Disease Control guidelines requires that drinking water to contain no more than 15 parts per billion of cyanide. A company produces carbon scrubbers to clean cyanide from water wells that could be affected by the contaminated groundwater. The company wants to investigate the effectiveness of a new carbon scrubber compared to that of an old scrubber. So we're going to have two scrubbers, a new and an old. They will test the scrubbers on a field that is bordered on one side by granite ledge and on the other side by a burned forest containing peach trees. The field is divided into 8 squared plots of equal size, and a well to collect groundwater is drilled in the center of each plot. One scrubber will be used in each well, so every single well is going to have its individual scrubber. The following diagram shows the placement of the wells in the field. All right. The company will use 4 of each type of scrubber to conduct the investigation. A randomized block design will be used. So they're telling us they're going to block, and they're telling us that we have 4 of the new scrubbers and 4 of the old scrubbers. Assuming there is a difference in effectiveness of the 2 scrubbers, under what conditions will a randomized block design be better for detecting the difference than a completely randomized design? We like randomized block designs when we believe that there's going to be a difference by group. So if the granite ledge has different cyanide levels than the burned forest, then we would prefer a randomized block to a completely randomized design. So basically, in a completely randomized design, we don't believe there's anything about the wells themselves that separate them into groups. With a block design, we believe that there's something that's going to impact the study that means that we have natural groups occurring. So if I believe that the granite ledge has higher or lower levels of cyanide than the burned forest, then I should block. Okay, so how should I block? Well, in this case, we have two. When you block, they need to be blocked on a single characteristic. So I need to make sure that everyone in the group has the same characteristics. So I would block such that 1, 2, 3, and 4 are in the same block, and 5, 6, 7, and 8 will be in the same block. The reason I chose those blocks is 1, 2, 3, and 4 are next to the granite ledge and I believe that they have different cyanide levels than 5, 6, 7, and 8, which are up against the burned forest. Describe how to assign scrubbers to wells through a randomized block design. Whenever you do a randomized block design, you basically need to have a hat for each block. So in this case, I have 2 blocks. I have the granite ledge blocks, which are wells 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I have a burned forest blocks, which are wells 5, 6, 7, and 8. So I'm going to, in this particular case, I will put into the hat. I will put into the hat 2 of the new scrubber and 2 of the old scrubbers. Then I would go to, mix them and draw. The first scrubber drawn would go to well 1. The second scrubber will go to well 2. The third scrubber drawn will go to well 3, and the fourth will go to well 4. Now, please note, I put in to the hat 2 of the new, 2 of the old. That way I make sure the granite ledge gets 2 of each type, both new and old. Then I'll go to the burned forest wells, which is 5, 6, 7, 8. Once again, I'm going to have 2 new scrubbers in the hat and 2 old scrubbers in the hat, and I'm going to mix them. And I really can't have the scrubbers, so I have to number them. All right? And so I number the scrubbers. The first number drawn, the scrubber associated with that will go to well 5. The next number drawn, the scrubber associated with that one will go to well 6. The next number drawn will go to well 7. And the next number drawn will go to well 8. Please make sure that you're numbering your scrubbers and that you have 2 of each type, 2 new, 2 old in the hat, and that you have 2 hats, one for the granite ledge and one for the burned forest. That because we have to randomize within each block. So in the context of this problem, what does the purpose of randomization serve? The purpose of randomization is to equal out the effects of an uncontrolled variables that might impact the study. In this case, that might impact the amount of cyanide. Perhaps those against the forest have higher levels, and those again, maybe wells 5 and 6 have higher levels than 7 and 8. So I need to randomize because I don't know what all is going on in those wells. So I randomize to equalize those differences so that the scrubbers are put under, have the best chance of having those effects equaled out. Okay, again, randomization is to equalize the impact of an outside variable, and I just need to create one. Maybe certain wells have more water, so it's easier to filter. Maybe they have too much water, so it's difficult to filter. Maybe they have too much cyanide, etc. But please note, I'm randomizing within the block, and I recognize that there are differences within the block. What those differences are, I don't know. I need to randomize. Because I don't know, I can't control for them, so I need to randomize to help control for them. Okay, this is version B, question 3. Oolong tea is a Chinese tea that is claimed to have several health benefits. Researchers investigated the possible beneficial effect on metabolism of drinking oolong tea and whether adding milk to the tea reduces any possible benefit. 348 volunteers are randomly assigned to one of three groups. Every day for a month, participants in Group 1 drank 2 cups of hot oolong tea without milk. Participants in Group 2 drank 2 cups of hot oolong tea with milk. Participants in Group 3 drank 2 cups of hot water, but no oolong tea. At the end of the month, the researchers measured the change in each of the group's participants' heart health. All right. Did the researchers conduct an experiment in our observational study? Explain. All right. The researchers conducted an experiment. Why? They randomly assigned treatments to, in this case, 3 separate groups. So because we randomly assign treatments, we have an experiment. All right. So why did the researchers include a group who drank hot water but no tea? The group that drank hot water is the control group, and they're controlling for the impact of a hot liquid. Why? This provides a baseline so that we know, and by the way, it's not enough to say a baseline, so that we know whether the impacts being seen are due to the treatments themselves, the hot tea with or without milk, or due to some outside variable. All right. So we need to make sure that you say it's a control group that provides a baseline so that we know that it's the changes we're witnessing is due to the treatment groups, in this case, the hot tea with or without milk versus some outside variable. Is it reasonable to generalize the results of the study beyond the 348 participants? Explain why or why not. Okay, this is a very tricky question. So first off, it's an experiment. So generally with experiments, you can generalize, but the question is to whom? Well, in this case, we know that we have volunteers and we don't know what they are. So if you said that we can generalize, you can say, well, the 348 volunteers are representative of the XYZ group, whatever that is. And so we can generalize to the XYZ group. I made up the XYZ group. You need to know what it is. Or you can say, if you said they're not, you cannot, you say, well, we have 348 volunteers and they do not represent the general population. So we cannot make it, we cannot make the 348, we cannot generalize this study to the 348, so to the generalized population. So really carefully, you could have argued both ways. But you had to say the 348 are representative of the XY population, therefore I can generalize to the XY population, or the 348 are not representative of the general population, and I cannot generalize because they were volunteers and not representative of that population. Just because they're volunteers doesn't mean they're not representative, but you need to make sure that you say that they are or they are not. I can definitely say that if I have volunteers, most of the time we have experiments, we have volunteers, but I need to make sure that I'm saying that my volunteers are similar to the population of interest. So if I have volunteers across Texas who are young women in the age of the 25 to 35 group, then I can generalize across Texas, women across Texas in the age 25 to 35 group. I cannot generalize to another group. So it's only if my sample is representative of the population, so you need to address whether or not it is representative. And since they didn't give specifics, you need to make a determination and you needed to make a statement. And because they did not give specifics, you actually got to make the choice on this one. Okay, so this is test version C, scenario 1. Texas A&M School of Agriculture is conducting an experiment to compare the impact of sunlight on the growth rate of 2 varieties of dwarf trees in a greenhouse. The greenhouse has 12 window box planters with adequate size for multiple trees. 12 dwarf trees, 12 dwarf apple trees, and 12 dwarf plum trees are available for the experiment. The floor plan of the greenhouse is shown below. The greenhouse is situated in a field that has no barriers to sunlight, So the east side receives direct morning sun and the west side receives direct afternoon evening sun. And by the way, really important, they're comparing the impact of sunlight on the growth rate. So basically, please note that our treatments in this case is sunlight, and our subjects are the trees themselves, all right? We have two different types of trees, the dwarf apple and the dwarf plum. So our setup is as shown, and the east side receives direct morning, the west side direct direct evening sun, or I should say late afternoon and evening sun. And then the north and south are not receiving direct sun. Inside the greenhouse, each window box planter is equipped with a photometer, a device that measures the intensity of light reaching the trees in the window planter. And that makes sense given that our treatment in this case that we're trying to figure out is how light impacts the trees. So describe how you would assign the dwarf trees to the window planters for a completely randomized design. Whenever you have a completely randomized design, that means every possible combination can occur, and you need a single hat. In this case, I have 12 dwarf apple trees and 12 dwarf plum trees. So I would just number those trees from 1 to 24 because I have two sets. All right. Then I would go stand by. So I number the trees 1 to 24. I put 24 slips of paper, the number 1 to 24 in a hat, and I'd mix. At window box 1, I would draw two numbers. The two numbers drawn would be assigned to window box. The trees associated with the two numbers drawn would be assigned to window box 1. Without replacement, I'd go to window box 2 and draw the next two numbers. The trees associated with those would be assigned to window box 2, and I would continue around the room until every single window box had two trees. Notice it'd be possible for a window box to have 2 plum. It'd be possible to have 2 apple in a window box, or it'd be possible to have an apple and a plum in each one. But the key here is I numbered 1 to 24, and every possible combination could happen. If I were to make a randomized block design, what variable would I block on and why? Well, we know that my treatments are the light, so I can't block on that. But there very well could be a difference in the tree type and the way that they grow. Because maybe the plum does better with one type of light, and the apple tree does better with a different type. So I would block by tree type because I believe tree type would have the greatest impact on the study, and the treatment was light, so I can't block on the treatment. I have to block on something besides that. So in this case, I would block based on the tree type. Based on the blocking variable you chose in part B, describe how you would group the window box planters into blocks. Clearly indicate your blocks for those numbers. So in other words, I need to make sure that I'm going to, even though, so I've blocked them, and so now how am I going to group these window box planters? Well, they've told me that there's a difference in light in the morning and the afternoon. So what I would do is I'd have 2, 3, 4, and 5 in one block. And by the way, there's multiple ways to do this, but 2, 3, 4, and 5 in one block, because those are my direct sunlight. And then I'd block 11, 10, 9, and 8 in the other block. That would have my afternoon light. Now, you can either put 1, 12, 6, and 7 together as a block, or you could actually separate them and have 1 and 12 and 6 and 7 because you're thinking there could be a difference in light from north side to south side. Or like I said, you could group them as a separate block, and that would be fine. Again, there were multiple ways to block that, but for me, because we know that there's different treatments, I would say treatment group would be 2, 3, 4, and 5. 11, 10, 9, and 8 would be the second one. And then I would group 1 and 12 and 6 and 7 together as the next group. For For randomized block design in Part C, why are the dwarf trees randomly assigned to the blocks? We always randomize in order to equalize the effects of uncontrolled variables. Some trees may be healthier than other trees, so because we don't know that, we need to make sure that we equalize the conditions. Quite frankly, some window boxes may have different special things about it. Maybe they're too close to the door. Maybe the window doesn't work as well. There's a long list, or maybe the soil in the window box isn't quite the same as the others. So basically, we have to make random assignment to the window boxes to equalize for differences, because some areas are going to be more preferred than others when we don't know what it is, and we don't want to bias a study by self-selecting. Part D, design and carry out a matched pair design for the study. Remember, in a matched pair design, you want to make sure that every single every single group is tested twice. All right, so in this case, I'll go, you know what? The way to do that is to make sure that each window box has one of each type of tree. So to make sure that window box 1 has an apple and a plum. Window box 2, an apple and a plum. So what I would do in order to do that is, and you still have to have randomization. In this particular case, I would put number the apple trees 1 to 12. I'd put 12 slips of paper in a hat and mix and draw. Standing by window box 1, the number drawn would go to that window box. I go to the window box 2 and draw an apple tree number. The tree associated with that number would go to window box 2, and I'd go around to that all the apple trees were assigned. I would do the same thing with the plum trees. I'd number the plum trees 1 to 12. I'd have 12 slips of paper that were numbered in a hat and mix. I'd go to window box 1 and draw. The plum tree associated with the number would go into window box 1. Therefore, I have at window box 1 a plum tree and an apple tree, and I would do this all the way around. Once I've done that, after a specific amount of time, I'd go back and I would measure the amount of growth that each tree had. All right, because we're looking for it, because that growth is our response variable in this particular instance. Beard length is this is scenario 2 for test C. Beard length is a sign of attractiveness among leprechauns. Unfortunately, many environmental factors have reduced beard length, the average beard length over time. There have been many studies that link decreased beard length among leprechauns to eating Lucky Charms cereal, their primary food source. While it's known that several magical components in Lucky Charms can inhibit beard growth among leprechauns, it's thought that increasing the percentage of pink hearts in the cereal may result in longer beard lengths. So in this particular case, we know we have a problem with beard lengths getting smaller among leprechauns, and we think Lucky Charms is inhibiting it. But if we increase the percentage of pink hearts, maybe that will help solve the problem. The effect of adding more pink hearts to the cereal on beard length will be studied over a 3-year period using 150 leprechauns who are non-smokers and who each eat 3 bowls of Lucky Charms a day, with 1 bowl being at breakfast, 1 at lunch, and 1 at dinner. Each of these 150 participants will be assigned to one of 2 groups. The experimental group will eat the Lucky Charms, which contains a 20% increase in the number of pink hearts, or the control group who eat the Lucky Charms with a standard proportion of pink hearts. Each leprechaun's beard will be measured at the beginning and at the end of the study. Describe an appropriate method for assigning the leprechauns to the 2 groups so that each group will have an equal number of subjects. Basically, I could put the names of 150 leprechauns in a hat and mix. Because I'm running a completely randomized design, I only need 1 hat. I can either number them 1 to 150, or I can put the names in a hat and mix. So I'm going to put the names in a hat and mix. The first 75 names drawn will go to the control group. Those are eating regular Lucky Charms, and the other will go to the experimental group that has the increase in pink hearts, the 20% increase of pink hearts. In this study, researchers chose to include a group who only ate Lucky Charms that had a standard proportion of pink hearts as their control group. Why is it important to include this control group in the study, even though beard lengths will be measured at the beginning and at the end of the study? Okay, the control group provides a baseline, and almost everyone told me that, but that's not adequate. The control group provides a baseline so that we will know that the changes being observed are due to the treatments, which in this case is the increase in pink hearts, or due to some outside environmental factor. All right, so are the changes we're observing in beard length, or is it due to an outside factor or due to the treatment group? And by having a control group, we have a baseline to know if that's happening. You have to be very specific about that. Why would the researchers choose to use only non-smokers in the study? It is possible that smoking is a confounding variable, that it might impact beard length. And because smoking might impact beard length or other health things that impact the study, we are going to eliminate, we're going to control for that amount of variation. So we're controlling for variation by limiting non-smokers because it could prove to be a confounding variable in the study and actually impact beard length. It's important that you say that it's could be a confounding variable or changes the variation, because we believe it might impact what we're studying, which was in this case beard length. Okay, so this is test C, version C, scenario 3, an anatomy class made up of 28 pre-med students and 20 business students is about to study human anatomy. Well, that makes sense. They're in an anatomy class. Before beginning the unit, the professor gives each of the 48 students in the class a pretest to assess their knowledge of human anatomy. The professor wants to compare the effectiveness of an instructional program in which students physically perform a human dissection with the effectiveness of a different performance in which the students use computer software that only simulates the dissection. After completing one of the two programs, students will be given a post-test to assess their knowledge of human anatomy. The professor will then analyze the changes in the scores, which is post-test score minus the score on the pretest. Describe a method for assigning a completely randomized design of 48 students to two groups of equal size that allows for a statistically valid comparison of the two instructional programs. Okay, so in this case, this is a completely randomized design. We have a completely randomized design. We are not breaking them down based on any characteristic. We are combining them all together into one hat and mixing. So I'm going to take the 28 pre-med students and the 20 business students. I'm going to put all their names in a hat. So that's 48 names in a hat. I'm going to mix those 48 names around and draw. The first 24 names drawn will go to the physical dissection. The remaining 24 names will go to the computerized dissection. They go through the program. The first 24 we measure how they performed on a pretest. They go through the program. After they've gone through the program, we measure how they do on the post-test. The 24 that went to the virtual, the very first thing they do is they take a pretest, they go through the virtual program, then they measure how they did on a post-test. At the end of the time, we compare results to determine whether or not the students had a greater increase in test score, whether it be with physical dissection versus the virtual program. If a randomized block were to be utilized, what variable would you block on? Justify your response. We always block on the variable that has that we believe will have the greatest impact on the study. Because we have two different types of students, pre-med students and business students, and we're looking at an anatomy class, I think it would be reasonable to block on the type of student. So I'd have 28 pre-med students in one group and 20 business students in the other group. And those would be my blocks. My blocks are not of equal size, and that's okay. I have a 28 in one and 20 in the other, and that's probably equal enough. The main thing is block on the variable that you think will have the greatest impact. And I think the pre-med students are going to perform differently than the business students. So I want to block on that characteristic of what they're studying. Suppose the professor decided to allow the students in the class to select which instructional program on frog anatomy they prefer to take, and 26 chose actual dissection and 22 chose computer simulation. How might that self-selection jeopardize a statistically valid comparison? All right, so provide a specific example to support your response. So this is saying, how could it happen? Why is it a problem? And then the other thing is create an example, and it just needs to be reasonable. So when I look at this and I go, you know what, I'm going to bet that the pre-med students as a whole are going to be more interested in doing a physical dissection than the business students. I don't know that, but so my concern here is that I would overrepresent one group. I very likely to overrepresent the pre-med in the physical dissection and overrepresent the business in the computer simulation. As such, I don't have fair representation across the groups, and in this case, I believe that there's going to be a difference. I'm going to believe that the pre-med students are going to be better at dissection, so consequently, their scores are going to have a different rate of change than the business students. So consequently, that does not equalize, because if I allow them to choose, I didn't randomize, I'm introducing a confounding factor, which happens to be personal preference. And I personally believe that in this specific instance, the pre-med students are going to choose a different type of dissection than the business students. And I believe the pre-med students are going to perform differently and I would suspect better. So consequently, my personal belief is you're going to find that the results are confounded by their choice, because it's very likely the pre-med students will perform on dissection, the physical dissection, and they're going to have the better scores versus the business students who choose the computer simulation and might have lower scores. So I might rule out the computer simulation when I shouldn't have, just because I did not have adequate pre-med students using the computer simulation. It's also, people will think, hey, one's gross and the other's not, and that might impact the way they perform. And typically speaking, someone who thinks dissection is gross is probably not going to perform as well as those who like dissection. So some sort of reasoning like this, a wide variety is possible, but the main thing is randomization is necessary to prevent confounding, to equalize the effects, to prevent confounding by equalizing the effects of outside variables that we're not controlled for.